Welcome everybody. My name is John Ozier and I'm the National Chair and Nashville Chapter President of the AIMP. Welcome to the AIMP's second edition of the Legends of Music Row. I'd like to thank Ree Geyer and Courtney Kruckenberg for their help in organizing today's panel. And before I introduce our moderator, I've got a few housekeeping items. The first, on October 14th, our New York chapter is hosting Recruiting and Retaining Talent in a Pandemic, How the Music Industry is Adapting to the New Reality. That's at 5:30 Eastern on October 14th. Then on Friday the 15th, the AIMP is sponsoring a day of panels at Mondo NYC, and it's the 2021 Publishers and Songwriters Program. They're all AIMP members can get a discount if you want to go log on and watch those panels, and you can find that at AIMP.org. Then on October 21st, our LA chapter is hosting The Music Industry, a Foreign Country Perspective. That's at 2:30 Pacific. And then lastly, on October 28th, our New York chapter is hosting What is the National Performing Rights Exchange, also known as NPREX, and can it be an alternative to licensing performing rights? I want to thank Regions Bank, which Leeds has already given them lots of shout out. And with that, it's my honor to introduce our moderator. He is a current member of the board of directors of both ASCAP and the NMPA and president of his own independent music publishing company. He serves as co-chair of ASCAP's Survey and Distribution Committee and is a member of ASCAP's Strategic Planning, Governance, and Legislative Committees. He's also served as president of MCA Music Publishing Worldwide and president of the Chrysalis Music Group. Beginning his career in music publishing at ASCAP, first in general licensing and later in membership, he subsequently established Elton John and Bernie Taupin's Rocket Music Publishing companies in North America. He then moved on to MCA Music Publishing, which is today's Universal Music Publishing Group, which is the world's second largest music publisher. As MCA's head of creative, he expanded the company's domestic creative team and grew its roster of songwriters, producers, and recording artists. Later appointed president of MCA Worldwide Operations, he rapidly grew the firm's revenues sixfold by opening multiple offices in key global markets, launching 3 separate and successful multi-genre record labels, as well as in-house record production. These combined initiatives resulted in multi-platinum selling artists, including, listen to this, Michael Jackson, the Pointer Sisters, Lee Greenwood, Alanis Morissette, and INXS. During his tenure with Chrysalis, he published multiple chart recordings by Elvis Presley, Avril Lavigne, Andrea Bocelli, and Outkast. Throughout his career, he's published hits by The Beatles, Madonna, Earth, Wind and Fire, Faith Hill, Soul Asylum, David Foster, Aerosmith, Whitney Houston, Janet Jackson, Luther Vandross, Sarah McLachlan, David Sanborn, Randy Travis, George Strait, Lee Greenwood, Alana Miles, and Bobby Brown, as well as numerous scores to motion pictures, television productions, and Broadway musicals. He continues to be an active music publisher through his associations with Sony ATV, Universal, BMG, Peer, and the Cobalt Music Group. He's a frequent speaker on music industry business practices like today. A native of New York, he was educated at the Juilliard School and the Berklee College of Music, and he is a graduate of Boston University. So with that, please welcome the esteemed Leeds Levy.
Wow, and that's the end of today's show.
Look at the time.
Okay, getting off of me, thank you. Goodness gracious, hire that guy. So as my father would say, what have you done for me lately? But I want to say thank you, and to Regions Bank, once again, John, okay. Welcome, Karen, welcome, Pat, welcome, David. I must say that reading your biographies, I think each of you, we could easily devote an hour to each of you. But we are on a schedule here, and I'm going to try and keep you guys on it. You've all contributed in outstanding ways to the Nashville music history, the music publishing industry, and we'll try in this next hour to cover some of the highlights of that. I'd like to thank my dear friend Ree and my new friend Courtney for the suggestion of starting with your favorite music business story. So I'm going to start with Pat. Hey, Pat, how about your favorite music business story? You must have one.
Well, I do have one. Back in the 60s, when Elvis would record in Nashville, everybody would have to bring their tapes, and it was usually on a little 3-inch reel, 1/4-inch tape. If y'all can remember back that far, and you played everything on a Wallensack. And so I would have to separate out the tapes between the ones that had a letter saying if it's BMI, half the publishing goes to Elvis Presley music. If it's ASCAP, half the publishing goes to Gladys. If you didn't have that letter with your tape, your song didn't get heard. So I would get all the tapes stacked up, and then Elvis would come in about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and sit at my desk and listen to all the songs. Well, he left his sunglasses on my desk one night, and they they said I could come to the studio the next day and meet Elvis and give him his sunglasses. Now you must understand, I was about 19 at the time. I found my best skirt and top from Walmart or Zayre's. Went to Ireland's and knocked back a couple of drinks and went over to RCA B, where Elvis always recorded. Well, he was sitting behind the board, and he was gorgeous. He got up and came around to meet me. He had on a red shirt and wheat colored jeans. He said, "Thank you for everything you do, blah, blah." And I reached out and said, "Here are your sunglasses." He reached for them. They fell to the floor. We dove to pick them up and I headbutted him. Oh my God. And all the the Kerrigans and your Briggs and Pachuki was running the board and all that. They were laughing their asses off. So Elvis told me to come behind the board and listen to a mix. And all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. And finally I squeaked out, "I gotta go." And I left. And he never, ever asked to meet me again. So that's one of my faves.
Excellent. Oh my God, that's
It was
fantastic.
horrible.
I thought you were going to say that then he asked you out for a date. Well, okay.
Oh, no. After I put a big knot on his head, he didn't want to see me again.
Okay, well, Karen, what have you got for us?
Well, I guess one of my favorite stories is kind of similar in nature because it just, well, not with Pat, not saying ineptitude, but when I first went to work for Blending Well and Sister John Music, it's, I'd been wanting to be a publisher, actually be able to pitch songs for years and years, but it took me years and years to get that opportunity. And finally, when I did, it was like, oh my gosh, now I've actually got to get a song cut. But my first pitch, one of my first pitches was to Chip Young, and he was producing Jerry Reed at the time. And really, I had very little catalog that was Nashville, but I had the Jim Croce catalog. And I was listening to those songs, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many great, great songs that Croce has written that Jerry Reed could do. And so I put these 2 songs, I picked out 2 of them, and I had remember the reel to reel, and I made the copy from one to another and took it over to Chip, and it's like, oh, here's my offering, I was so nervous, and he puts it on, and 2 songs come through because I had recorded over dirty tape. And so he just laughed and turned one side off, and it was, he had to listen to it mono. And I told him that I thought that every song that Jim Croce had would be wonderful for Jerry to do. And he just laughed again. And I kind of crawled out of the office. And about a week later, he called and said, "Karen, that idea that you had about, all the songs that Croce has would be great for Jerry Reed. Well, we're going to do an album, Jerry Reed Sings Jim Croce." Wow. And so my very first cut was an album of 10 songs. And it's like, I was able to finally just exhale. And it's like, wow, I think maybe I can do this. As inauspicious as my first pitch was, it really turned into just a wonderful.
A grand slam. A grand slam. Wow. Wow.
So,
I thought you were going to say the 2 songs, he did both songs. Not wow.
I know. And so that's my absolute favorite music business story.
David, what do you got for us?
I have, I just have to tell you the one I can remember.
Oh, there we go.
This part of personal reference, but I was a young guitar player from North Carolina, and I dreamed of moving to Nashville and being just that. You know, I was going to retire from guitar playing. Came over here, and I'll encapsulate this. I met Chet Atkins, who was a heavy hitter, as you probably know at the time and later, and he took a liking to me and under the wing, as it were, and all that. And when I finally moved over here, I'm bumping around looking for work and that sort of thing, and trying to play here and there and recording sessions, and wasn't having much luck. And I was about to go home. I went by his office one afternoon, and he was he says, "How's it going? Hang out for a minute. I gotta call Jack Clement," because he was in his RCA office. Clement was recording Charlie Pride, and so he gets on the phone with Jack Clement, and he finishes his business. He said, "Jack, you don't need a guitar player over there, do you? A rhythm player, maybe somebody will play a little rhythm for you." And he said, "You can play rhythm, can't you?" I said, "Sure, yeah." I mean, who can't play rhythm? You know, I didn't know. So he said, "Yeah, okay, we'll send him over." And the short story is, he hung up. He just tells me how to get over to Belmont Boulevard and Cowboy Jack's recording spa. Is that what you call it? Crazy Arms Hotel and recording spa. So I'm 19. And most of the music that I played was really the guitar I was interested in was more modern jazz, bossa nova, that sort of thing. I had not gotten into country recording session rhythm. So I knock on the door. Here comes Clement, and he invites me in the inner sanctum there. And he sits down behind his desk, and I'm sitting on a bed in front of the desk. That's all he has, you know. And on that bed is this big Martin guitar, which that's certainly the nicest guitar I'd ever seen at that point. And so he kicks back in his banker chair, and he said, "Well, so he asked me the usual questions, and I'd been playing guitar for several years in different bands, and club in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, called the Cat's Cradle, that since has become a stop for everybody." But so he says, "Well, Chet asked me," he said, "if I needed a rhythm player, I could probably use a rhythm player. Can you just play me something, anything?" So I picked up this Martin guitar next to me and cradled it, and it turned out to be the worst Martin guitar that anyone has ever held. Like it had been floated in a creek or something. But I managed to tune it and get it going, and I took off playing this piece. I don't remember. It was something, a finger style thing of some sort. That's just what I did. And I played and played, and I played it again. I played my heart out, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, another chorus, and finished with a flourish. And Clement he's rocking back and forth in his chair. I'm thinking, I nailed that. I did that. Nailed it. And he's rocking back, and he's got this banker held visor on. He lifts it up and he says, "Did you ever play bass?"
Perfect.
Bass might be your instrument, and that's not what you want to hear when you're 19 and have a big dream. I'm sorry if I went on too long.
So basically, you had the perfect face for radio.
Exactly, and until Jack left this earth for 40 years, because I knew I'd see him and he'd punch me, and I said, "How's your bass playing coming?"
Nice. Hey, Pat, tell me, I was reading about your start and Lamar Fike. Who was Lamar Fike? How did you come to go to work at Hill and Range back in 1966? And explain who the heck Hill and Range were.
Okay, Lamar Fike was a member of Elvis Mafia.
Aha.
Ever see the pictures? He's the big 400-pound guy with the snow white hair. That's Lamar. Well, my roommate at the time, Claudia Koss, was working at Hill and Range, and she prepared to leave town to marry somebody and move to Washington, D.C. And he called me up and said, "Do you want to be my secretary?" And I said, "Yeah." And then I got my job because I'm a big fat liar. He said, "You can type and take dictation, can't you?" And I said, "Sure." I didn't even know what a typewriter looked like, but I kind of muddled through that.
Oh my
And
God.
Hill and Range Songs is a fascinating story. I'm going to go as quick as I can. But two brothers, Gene and Julian Aberbach, were from Austria. When Hitler came to power, they fled to London. They went to work for Max Dreyfus at Chapel Music. They decided they wanted to come to New York, and Max said, "Well, the only thing you can't do, I'm going to let you go, but you cannot have anything to do with what they call back then popular music." So Gene and Julian started listening to the Grand Ole Opry, and they would hear a song. I asked Gene once, "How'd you get the publishing on Room Full of Roses?" He said, "Well, after we heard it, we liked it, and we called George Morgan up and said, 'Would you like for us to publish your song?' And he said, 'Yeah.'" And that's how they built their power empire on Marty Robbins, Eddie Arnold, Cindy Walker, Ernest Tubb. You just go on and on and on. And that's how Gene and Julian started their business. And then along with their first cousin, Freddie Beanstalk, they made a deal with Carl Parker where they all had equal shares in Elvis and Gladys Music Publishing. So that's where Lamar comes in.
And who taught you to become a music publisher? How did you?
Actually, my second day on the job, Jim Vino called and said, "We cut your song Walk Softly on the Bridges, I think, by Mill Street, and we want a penny rate." And I went, "Hold on, please, Jim." I said, "Lamar, Jim Vino wants a penny rate." And Lamar said, "Well, what the hell's a penny rate?" And I went, "I don't know. I've just been here 2 days." Well, he was on, it was pretty scary stuff. Thanks, Karen. He was on the road all the time with Elvis. He was in charge of the Mirabal. So I had a lot of free time, even at my first week. And so I went over to Bill Hall and Bob Webster at Jack and Bill Music, excuse me, and they taught me publishing.
And they taught you publishing.
Yeah, I would go over there for a few hours a day. And, they taught me things about most favored nations. I didn't know what a foreign right was, anything like that. And they just took me through the basics. They were just generous with their time and their knowledge. And I will never, ever be able to thank Bob Webster and Bill Hall enough for telling me what I needed to know. The rest I kind of learned by the seat of my pants.
Right. You fake it until you make it.
Yeah. Well, you're looking at one. I had to fake typing and dictation.
So Karen, tell me, I saw that you started as a receptionist at the Hubert Long agency. I assume talent agency. I don't know. I don't recall Hubert Long. Why did you wind up there? How long did you stay there? And tell us a little bit about that. Where'd you learn that you thought you wanted to get involved in the creative activities?
Right. Well, I had a roommate, Gloria Peterson, who was a teller at the 19th and West End branch of First American. And I was working as a legal secretary, but I really wanted to get into something else. I wanted.
So you did know how to type.
Well, I knew how to type. I'll tell you, I was the worst secretary ever. I feel like I have to apologize to anybody who I worked for as a secretary, and that includes Ed Shea when I worked for ASCAP. It's like, oh my gosh, bless their hearts, But anyway, I guess I did enough to.
Audio.
I think we've got a little disconnect. Okay, so Karen and David seem to have been caught in a freeze frame there. It's now become the Leeds and Pat show. So let me, while we've got Pat here live, I want to ask you a little bit about when you, it's interesting at Hill and Range, and it's given that, you know, the period in which you started, which was mid 60s going into the 70s, how, you know, what was it unusual as a woman to be in that position as a song plugger?
Well, what was unusual in that woman, and I'm going to say it's twofold, since Lamar was on the road so many months a year with Elvis, and it was only a two-person office. It was Lamar and me. And, you know, the writers couldn't just leave their songs laying around. Now, thank God Ray Baker had signed Dallas Frazier, and we had Doodle Owen. So we had the Doodle and Dallas stuff, but we had other writers like Eddie Rabbit and a few other writers that are no longer with us. So somebody had to pitch the songs. So I started out, you know, and that was back then when you had acetates and you
Right.
put it in your briefcase. And by the time you came back, your arms were kind of like this from carrying around those heavy acetates. So that's how I got started. Then in 1972, our covey with Elvis Gladys ended, and they fired Lamar and offered me his job. So that was the unusual part for me to become the person that ran a big giant publishing company like Hill and Range Songs.
And the question is, were there other women in similar positions at similar types of sized companies, I suppose?
Well, you know, Francis was always at BMI.
BMI, right?
Davis was running Jim Reeves Enterprises. I think Maggie might have been at, or was it Emily Bradshaw had some kind of position, maybe with Naris. But as far as an out and out song plugger with writers and stuff like that, I might have been the only one.
Pioneer, right?
And they told me to get to know all the record producers and the record managers in Nashville. And I was like, what do you mean, the producers and A&R people? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, I already know them. Right. And they called around to a few people, and some really nice people gave me a recommendation, and it went forward from there.
Okay.
Right.
Karen, do we have Karen back on the line? Are you there? Are you?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Okay. So anyway, Chuck went up to her window, and he happened to tell her that he was looking for a secretary, and she said, I happen to have a perfect one for you. And I went and interviewed, and I really wasn't that excited about it because, to tell you the truth, I was not a huge country music fan. You know, I was a girl of the 70s and all about rock and roll. But he was running the Young Sounds division of Hubert Long's agency. And I went and interviewed, got the job. And 2 weeks into it, I was just in love with the people, you know, that just well, first of all, there were people like George Jones and Tammy Wynette and just every major artist of that time they were part of the Hubert Long agency. And I just fell in love with creative people, and then fell in love with country music, and realized that, you know, country music may sound simple, but it's not simple. It's and creating it is not easy. It's to tell a story the way a country music writer does. It's almost like, you know, a 3-act play, but they do it in 3 minutes and 20 seconds. And that's, you know, that's just brilliant. It's brilliant that someone is able to do that and put all of the ingredients into it, you know, the setting, the emotion, everything. And I just fell in love with country music. And that's when I knew that I really wanted to be involved with writers, with the creators of the music. And just went on from there. I worked at Hubert Long Agency for a couple of years. As I said, I was a horrible secretary. They actually did promote me into the contracts division. And when I did a contract for a George Jones concert and left out that there needed to be a piano on stage with the A tuning, I left that out. I got fired, and I should have. So, but then I was only out of the business for 6 weeks and got a job offer from Mercury Records, Rory Burke, who was a promotion man and a songwriter, and
and a great song salesman
yeah,
of his own songs.
Yeah. So I got better at my job then. It's like, okay, I needed to pay attention, and I started paying attention.
Hey, David, I was looking, I saw you have a college degree in radio, TV, and motion pictures. And this is out of Salem, out of North Carolina, at Chapel Hill. And I'm like, so you headed in that direction. How did you come to go to Nashville Chet Atkins? I mean, great, but I mean, proficiency in classical guitar, right? What happened? I mean, Karen, obviously, Karen was like, country music, no, goes to work at this agency, gets her mind blown by the experience of these people, and suddenly finds out what it's about and becomes a convert effectively. How does that come together?
Well, Chapel Hill in North Carolina was a hotbed of music. It has been a long one. Before I got there, James Taylor came out of there, and a variety of folks, and I was playing the guitar from probably 14 years old or something.
But classical, not country.
No, not country. Classical music, jazz music, West Montgomery, those sorts of things, but a finger style of guitar. And I had became aware of Chet. Wasn't deep into it. Anyway, the short end of it is, arrived in Chapel Hill. You go through the first year, you're freshman, and you're sophomore, and you're wondering what to do and where to light and what to study, and began right away playing in clubs and stuff down there. And the deal with radio, television, motion pictures was there was a kid behind in a classic calculus class sit behind me named Charlie Huntley, who was a drummer, and we got a little trio together, and he was majoring in radio, television, motion pictures, and I said that's for me, because any project I have to do, all I got to do is I can play the guitar, I can do everything around music. And that's exactly what I did when I had to make a film and when I had to produce a radio show. And so it was really just a practical choice. And there were very few radio, television, motion picture departments at American universities back then, like Michigan State, UCLA, UNC was one of the first. Now they're everywhere, but and it was the summer before I left to go to UNC that I met Chet, and managed. He was kind enough. He did for me what he did for hundreds of kids. He kept up with you. He answered letters. He invited you to Nashville. And
was it a long distance relationship, or did he come to Chapel Hill?
Yeah, no, it was well, I'd come to Nashville when I could. But back then, the Nashville All-Stars were Chet Atkins, Floyd Kramer, Boots Randolph.
Yeah.
And who else? Sometimes he'd bring Jerry Reed along. Sometimes he'd bring Glenn Campbell along. And these guys were all big golfers. So they got their agent, ex-Cosay, to book them around pro celebrity golf tournaments. He'd book a concert night in North Carolina, in Greensboro, and during the day there would be a pro celebrity tournament, so they could all play golf all day, and then they do a show at night and walk off with some bucks, and anywhere he was on that end of the United States, I would show up, and they were all so kind. Those guys, I'll tell you, and that I don't think has changed. What Chet Atkins did for me, Owen Bradley, Harlan Howard, some writers, some pickers, some producers. Early on, they offered, and and I have always tried to do that. They offer the most valuable, most important thing you can give somebody young coming up, and that is time and access. They can't, they're not going to part the sea, and cause success. You got to be ready. You have to have your polish ready when it comes time. But the magic there, the secret, the greatness of those guys, that their generosity of time and availability. And Chet was always like that for me. And plenty of others.
But it wasn't a situation where he saw you play live. It was you actually reached out to him as a fan,
no.
How did that?
When the summer before I started college, I don't want to get too deep into this. I'll take too much time, but I visited Nashville in August before I started college, and a pal of mine, I stayed out in Hendersonville, and a friend of mine said, Chet Atkins is playing downtown, playing up at WSM. We should go. You might get to meet him. And I said, fine. And we went to WSM about 5, 6. He was actually taping a morning show because he didn't want to get up that early. So we arrived at WSM. We're in the studio. They got those about 50 people on bleachers, the way those old shows work. And it was the Boyce Hawkins, kind of a Ralph Emery type show with a band and a desk and 3 chairs. And so Chet is sitting in a corner waiting to go on. And this fellow, my friend, encouraged me to go and take my little book and go get an autograph. So I walk up to him, and he's sitting on a stool in the corner. They're doing the weather or something, And I said who I am, signed my book. And in order to do that, he had to hand me the guitar. There was nowhere to put it. So I took the guitar, he took the book, and it was the finest thing I'd ever held. I put my foot on the stool and I strummed some chords. I mean, that was about all, really. Whole thing, we're talking about 30 seconds. I strummed some changes to a popular tune, and he finished signing. He stood up, he took the guitar away from me and handed me my little book back. And on behind him, I'm hearing, oh, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a real treat for you tonight, Mr. Guitar, et cetera, et cetera. And he's backing up. He says, nice to meet you. You got a really nice touch. You want to play with me on this show tonight? And
Wow.
And that was it.
Wow.
I said, gee, I don't think I better do that. And he said, I said, I didn't prepare anything. And he's backing away because they're introducing him. And he's backing away. He just waved. He said, you'll be fine. You just stay there till I call you. And that was it. And that's the way I met him originally.
I think I've seen this movie. It's called A Star Is Born.
Yeah, something like that. But so I sat on the stool and waited while he played some tunes and they did their snappy patter, and then he introduced me, or caused Boyce Hawkins to, and that was in 1967.
Good year. Summer of Love, 1967.
Yeah, man. Great cars. I'll shut it now.
Hey, no, that's great. Pat, tell me, how did things change when Chappell bought Hill and Range? How did, suddenly you're sort of thrust into going from a privately held company to a pretty big organization, right? I mean, how did that work? Did your status change? Was it a positive thing? Who was your mentor there? Was there a mentor there for you?
Well, really, when Chappell bought Hill and Range, I was kind of part of the deal.
Right.
I was the only one that knew the couple of thousand songs that we had, in the Hill and Range catalog. And Henry didn't have that many people working for him. Chappell was still fairly a small organization on Music Row. So he was like, I don't know these songs. We've got to take Pat with
This is Henry Hurt.
Yeah, Henry. So I went over to Chappell, and Celia went to work for Charlie Pride's company. I think it was called Chardon at the time. But one of the assistants at Chappell left to get married, and I was able to bring Celia over with me. So basically, Henry, Celia, and I were the major song pluggers from that time on, because they didn't really need to learn our catalog, but we needed to learn the chapel catalog. And so, we pitched them back and forth and just, kind of got immersed into all companies.
Would you say that was Chapel, before the acquisition of Hill and Range, was it as successful in country as Hill and Range? Because I mean, Hill and Range was really focused on a genre. It was, as Gene Auerbach explained to me, it was the Hill and the Range. It was country and Western.
Right. No, actually, and this is kind of funny. Connie came, we were talking one day and she said, well, Henry's changing jobs. And I said, where's he going? And she said, he's going to some company named Chapel Music. I said, I've never heard of that.
Oh, so there you go. There you go. It all. So you really were the anchor. Your operation was the anchor for them. Their ability to expand into country music was through the acquisition of Hill and Range. They really were. They didn't have a profile really on Music Row.
Right. Well, when Norm Weiser and Heinz Boyd, who was the godfather of all the polygram companies,
Right,
met with me, it was a little bit scary because it was three giants and I'm 5 feet tall and I'm meeting with these people like, oh my God. And they said, we really need to expand our repertoire and get more country. And since we had such a huge background, by that time we'd acquired Johnny Cash. And so we had what they needed and they could continue to build their office with, then Henry signed Rory Burke, Charlie Black, Lane Martin. He signed a stellar group of writers, and that's why Chapel, I think, went on to be a bigger success if they had just stayed without that kind of legacy catalog with them. The catalog got a great amount of activity, but most of our award songs were newer songs for newer artists at the time.
Forgive my ignorance. Was Henry I thought Henry was at Chapel. Or was he also at Hill and Range at one point?
No, he was running Chapel.
He was Chapel.
Connie at the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Before that, he was at, I think, Dot Records.
Right.
And
So,
he was contacted to go to Chapel.
Right.
So he was running Chapel, but when he was getting ready to take the job, Connie and I didn't know who Chapel Music was.
Exactly.
But he founded the Nashville Chapel Music office.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, he did a great job.
Karen, I'm just curious, Blending Well Music, was Phil Kernett involved with that? Do I have that right?
Yeah, Phil Kernett, Terry Cashman, Tommy
Right.
West. And
Right.
Phil and I still keep in touch, and he's just such a lovely man.
He was a lawyer. Cashman West were pretty important producers at the time, but I remember them more on, I thought, on the pop, were they country producers?
Right, they had it seems like it was Gene Pistilli.
Yes, very good.
Trio.
Yeah.
And they were, pretty they did pretty well. Is that true?
In country?
No.
No. That's what I thought.
Maybe more folk.
They were pop, and of course, Croce was their big blow up. They had Dean Friedman. I remember a couple of their acts, but it was very much of a New York, very cool kind of a New York operation, because I remember pitching songs to those guys. But I was curious, what made them think to go into Nashville? What was it? Where was the,
Tommy, it was really Tommy West, who really loved country music and got into producing country music. He was doing Gail Davies at the time, and Ronnie Rogers. I'm trying to think of who else. He did quite Judy Rodman.
Sure, yeah.
And he wanted to open a Nashville office. Well, Terry wasn't really into it much at all, and Phil Kernett really wasn't into it, but they went along with it.
Yeah.
And I had been working for Jimmy Buffett, and that's when Buffett changed managers from Don Light to Irving Azoff, and then Irving moved everything out to the coast.
Sure.
And they asked me if I would go, but I had already met this guy, and
she already signed me.
Yeah, and so it was pretty serious, and I decided to just stay in Nashville. And so there I was again, out of a job. And Tommy had heard, I don't even know who told Tommy about me, but as we were celebrating or having the first and last annual Coral Reefer Music Going Out of Business in Nashville party, Tommy calls, and we're yucking it up big time in the background, right? Having a good time. And he said, hey, I hear that you might be interested in running a publishing company. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because I really, with Buffett, even though I was in publishing, excuse me, he, of course, didn't really want his songs pitched. He wasn't interested in other people doing his songs. I can't imagine why not. But anyway, I wasn't doing what I really wanted to do, which is working with the copyrights and pitching. But so Tommy wanted to open an office here, and he gave me the opportunity to do it. And I told you about my very first cut, and that's
you couldn't have done any better than that.
Yeah. And 6 years later, you know, we were really rocking. We had some really great hits, and Tommy he died just a few months ago, but I'm so grateful to him, and so grateful to others who had given me the opportunity, you know, where I was totally unproven as a publisher, you know, and it just has been a great time, great way to make a living, you know.
I hear you, David. I remember you at Almo Irving. That's and man, you were on fire. And Chuck Kay, Lance Freed, Evan Meadow, those are guys that, I mean, I grew up in a music publishing family, but those guys were the guys I wanted to be. I was like, I think Pat was talking about acetates. I mean, you'd go over to Arista Records to try to get a cut with Barry Manilow, and there'd just be a stack of Almo Irving acetates, you know, and I'm like, oh man. And I had this newfangled thing called a cassette. You know, it was like, that's probably not as impressive as an acetate. But anyway, but you got to work with some giant music publishers. I mean, Chet Atkins, a legendary producer, player. But I mean, I found the interesting thing was, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but while the publishing company and the record company worked very closely together, at least my impression was in LA and in London, I don't recall A&M making an entree into Nashville as a record label, as signing artists. Am I mistaken about that? Because normally it would have been hand in glove in LA between Chuck and the, you know, David Anderle and all the A&R guys at A&M, but I don't remember them having that experience in Nashville.
No, no, not they didn't to the degree that you're talking about. The publishing company came first, and that was the whole Chet Atkins thing led me, you know, the guitar playing never went away, but it allowed me to meet other folks and kind of back into the publishing world, where I worked with Charlie Pride or worked with Tom Collins at Charlie Pride's company for 10 years. And that's where you make your bones. And Tom Collins showed me how publishing worked. But mostly I learned publishing from the songwriters who, when they get this green guy in and they say, my God, I got to depend on this guy to feed my kids and make my house payment and this. So, you know, that's where I learned. But 10 years into that, then Almo Irving, the A and the M, they decided, because Nashville, this was 1981, Nashville is heating up once again. And Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss principally told Lance Freed, because Chuck Kay had been running Warner Music for a good while.
Oh, he was already, okay.
He was already gone to Warner's, and he had hired, I think he'd hired Tim Whipperman down here by that time. Charlie Pride's company was sold one week, and much like what Karen was saying, we're kind of all celebrating the end of the week that like nobody's got a job, and so we're having our day and we're in our cups and all that. And I and like 5 that evening, I get a call from Lance Freed saying, "Hey, this is Lance Freed and Elmo Irving, and I hear you might be available soon," because Frances Preston had told him like 2 weeks earlier. She knew I wasn't going to have a job well before I knew I wasn't going to have a job. So I won't go into that entire story, but we'd had a lot of wine, and I said, "Hey man, that's sweet. Can you call me back next week?" And by golly, and he did. And he said, "Okay." The deal was, and of course I flew and met him and took the job. And it was until then, when we got off the ground here and had a few, we began to have a hit or two, some with a couple of Nashville, like Kent Robbins, an early Nashville writer that I'd known from Pride, Graham and Lyle, Gallagher and Lyle from England, where that Stuart Hornell sent me a bucket of English songs. We started having, and that woke Jerry Moss and David Anderley and some of these guys up. That I think, I mean, those are consummate music men, up and down. They just didn't take the time to investigate Nashville until, the sister company, a song company, started to grow and produce some results. Right. And we were only making money. We weren't costing money. The rent we paid on the building they spent that at lunch at La Dome, Right. So that's when, Anderley started showing up down here, and Gil Friesen started showing up, and he signed Amy Grant. And there was some hand holding going on. They never opened A&M Records here. Right. They later on hired Garth Fundus and opened Almo Sounds. Right. We signed. I had signed Gillian Welch, and we put her on that. But that was a relatively short-lived, a couple of years, I think. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question at all.
But no, you did. I was always fascinated. I thought, God, it was so innovative and smart of what they did. West Coast publishers were so into the pop scene, and, particularly A&M with the Carpenters, or they were heavy into the English scene, Supertramp, right? It was built on the back of Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, being sold literally, Jerry Moss selling those records out of the trunk of his car. Right. And yet, here they, as I say, it was interesting. I didn't realize Chuck was already gone by that point, but, and Jerry had, the nose of, there's something going on here. We need to get into it. And Lance and picking you that was such a smart move. And I think it kind of, are talking about almost cycles in terms of the crossover from country to pop, and that sort of gets the pop record guys sort of attention. And, there's some, maybe we'll, put some investment in there, but we're not sure, and let's check it out. But what a great opportunity. You've seen this with Disney, sort of having a little toe in the water in Nashville, but it was so ripe. You were having so much success that I was surprised they didn't say, okay. And I thought you were going to say, well, about that time, Jerry and Herbert decided to sell the record company, and that was the beginning of the, exit strategy, as opposed to further involvement and further investment. But
yeah, the song company was Elmo Irving's success down here was a catalyst, but it didn't stop them. The record business changed to the degree that they didn't care for the way things were being done, and A&M was on the block. But Moss took me to lunch out there and said, "But don't worry, we will." And he pounded his finger on the table. "We will never sell the song company." And I said, "Jerry, never's a long time, pal." Right. And of course, in 02 or 03, whatever it was, it went its way. But
yeah, you're talking about a period where there was that changeover from independent record distribution to all the majors, and because the independent record companies couldn't get paid because the distributors would basically, they'd send out the records, you'd wait 30 days, 60 days, and the publishers are waiting right behind them, right? I mean, waiting for
Oh yeah. In fact, we were always waiting behind somebody,
somebody, right?
just like the songwriter. I guess a lot of that may be still the same today, you know. But
Well, that's all. Now that's a 2 hour.
that's another webinar. Isn't it?
Exactly. Just checking on our time. We're good. Pat, I'm just curious. I mean, Chapel, were you there for the Warner Chapel during the merger? Was that?
No, when Warner Brothers decided to buy Chapel, they let Henry and I go. They said, we don't need any more vice presidents, whatever. And they kept Celia, which was a good thing for them. And then that week, Bob Doyle went into Connie's office and said, you know, I'm getting ready to leave to manage Garth. I think you ought to hire Pat. And Connie said she was too close to it to see it, but she thought it was a great idea. So I finished out 22 years with Chapel Music, and I only had 2 jobs.
Right.
22 years with Hilden Range Chapel, 22 years with ASCAP, and then I went home.
Got it. Got
It
it.
worked great for all of us.
What a great career. What a great, I mean, I think it was 7 ASCAP Country Music Award. I mean, it's just like unbelievable. Yeah, that merger thing, it's murder. It's just, you know, for the songwriters, the songs they don't even know they have. You know, it was interesting that Chapel was smart enough when they acquired Hill and Range, how to merge that into a machine. I mean, it really was. And
And I'll
you
tell you
know,
what was really smart is that Gene and Julian kept their 25%. So Elvis and Gladys, and they only sell admin rights. Anywhere that cattle goes, admin goes. And Susan Averbach is still living very nice in Cabo St. Lucas.
yeah, I don't think most of the people understand that, but it was a very clever strategy. Steve Ross did that at Warner's. Whenever he'd sell a company, he'd always keep 10% just in case. And the Averbachs did the opposite. They sold it and they kept a piece. And that was brilliant. You know, it's because you never know what's going to happen with that over time. I think you mentioned most of your mentors. I don't know if you have any perspective. This, of course, is I imagine some of the people are curious. You know, you've seen the changes in the industry, and I don't know if you have any comments that you want to, you know, offer up to people that are either new in publishing or been in publishing for a while, from your experience.
I do. The only thing I can ever say is never pitch a song you don't believe in.
Okay. Okay.
That's it. That's it.
Karen, you got anything for our friends out there?
Yeah, I talk about pitching. I'd say if you believe in a song, don't ever stop pitching that song.
Right.
And that kind of reminds me of a story, a funny story, where there was a song that I thought was just wonderful, that I pitched to Paul Worley, and he turned it down. And then I pitched it again, you know, I don't know, a month or so later. And he said, Karen, I already passed on that song. And I kept pitching that song to him probably, I don't know, 6-8 months. And finally he said, Karen, don't pitch that song to me again. And changed the title of the song and put it on a tape and put it in and pitched it again. And believe it or not, he actually did record the song eventually on the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band.
You warmed down. You warmed down.
You know, a little tenacity might go a long way.
Actually threatened to kill me if I pitched all of his artists this one particular song that they all loved and took back. And Bowen called me one day and he said, if you pitch No Relief in Sight one more time, I'm going to effing come over and kill you.
What a business. What a great business for them to be that involved in the process. What about you, David? What do you have for our listeners out there, our viewers out there today?
In terms of publishing, which is all I knew, all I could do, and all I believe was you just took care of the writers, and the songs, and the rest would fall into place, and stay focused on that. And I was really fortunate. I had some staff Mary Dell Frank, Dick Frank's daughter, to Mary Dell Frank
Dick
Scobie now,
Frank, yeah.
was so astute with regard to licensing and the rules, this and that and the other, that I just didn't worry myself with.
Right.
I finally, had to became knowledgeable about it, at least know what a compulsory license is and that sort of stuff. And but for the most part, I was allowed to do nothing but creative work, and it was encouraged by Lance Freed from the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
And the writers, like I said, every day I learned far more from them than they did me. And starting with John Schweers and Kent Robbins in the 70s to Emmy Lou and Gillian Welch and this, John Anderson. I worked with a lot of writer artists, and it always fleshed out if you were mindful of what they needed and gave them time when they needed it. Then the money and the awards, that'll all be there.
One thing I noticed about all of your biographies was that, and it's so true of Nashville, it's such an integrated community in terms of support, the various, fundraising, whether it's golf or this or that, or education or, Leadership Nashville. It's a very unique, you don't see that in any other community that I've experienced, New York, LA, Chicago, whatever. It's really, it's quite unique. And you've all participated in it and continue. And I think that, you were talking about people, sort of an open door policy of and support and nurturing in the community. That's very unique and unusual. And for those viewers that are in the Nashville music community, that I found, from the day I went down to Nashville working for Elton and Bernie, Bob Beckham, Combine Music, come on in, sit down. He's pitching me a song because he thinks I'm going to give him to get Elton to record one of the, songs I like. Great song. That's how I met Rob Galbraith and Thomas Kane and whatever. It was just from, just all the Nashville publishers. What an experience. A total
culture all its own.
Yeah, so great. I think we're at the close of our time together. I don't know if they're going to just cut us off or what, or if Courtney's going to come back online here. I see. How did we do, John?
You all are fantastic.
Did the needle go this way or?
Absolutely incredible. I think
did Regions Bank call and say, who the heck is that guy? We want all our money back. Cancel this thing.
Absolutely not. You all are fantastic. So Pat, Karen, David, thank you so much. Leeds, thank you for sharing your time. We appreciate you all being here. We have recorded this, so this will be up on our website shortly. And thank you all for being here and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Great fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Karen, David, Pat, thank you.
Bye, Leeds.
And if I insulted any of you, I meant every word of it.
You did a great
Bye,
job.
Pat. Good job, Leeds.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Everybody did great.
Bye.